Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thank you for logging on today. We're waking up with watches, and as usual, everything you see here is for sale. Some of these pieces are not on our website, nor will they be offered on our website. So all names and references in the description. If you see something you like, email me. tmosso@thewatchbox.com. It is the direct purchase and pricing inquiry line from you to me for everything you see here. Let's get started with an absolute leviathan. A leviathan of precious metal. This is the 2019 20th anniversary FP Journe Tourbillon Souverain. Technically the Tourbillon Souverain, as with the previous model, this is sometimes called the Tourbillon Vertical, simply because it is exactly that. Now a 42mm platinum case for the anniversary, the 20th anniversary of FP Journe's original watch under Montre Journe. We have an all-new redesigned tourbillon. Let's start from the outside and work our way in. The watch is 42mm in diameter by 13.6mm thick, obviously in platinum. FP Journe puts his best foot forward. The precious metal continues on the dial side, and we're going to get super close. And you can see that there is a guilloche cut rose gold dial with a lovely hobnail on top, a finely textured hobnail with a few black polished segments. Now moving down to the dial, you could see that the dial for hours, minutes, and deadbeat seconds, they are crafted out of Grand Faux enamel. So no more silvered brass as on previous FP Journe subdials. These are Grand Faux. Black polished screws on the dial side, power reserve indicator for the 80-hour power reserve, and a now vertical tourbillon. We'll talk about the logic of that in a moment. But what matters is that it's more visible and it moves at twice the speed. No longer a 1-minute tourbillon. This is now a 30-second tourbillon, pirouetting once every 30 seconds. It still beats away at 21,600 vibrations per hour, still free sprung, still with an overcoil hairspring, but you could see now vertically oriented, and the reason is simple. FP Journe reasons that a wristwatch tourbillon can't keep time the way a pocket watch tourbillon can, because it will change its orientation constantly on the wrist. But on the dresser at night, that is different. Now, if the watch lays flat, the tourbillon is vertical. If the watch lays on its 9 o'clock side, the tourbillon is vertical. If the watch lays down on its crown side, the tourbillon is vertical. And if the watch lies dial down, the tourbillon is vertical. Therefore, when the watch is not on the wrist, it is in fact canceling out the effects of gravity on the hairspring, restoring the original purpose of the tourbillon. And thanks to a concave mirror polished chapter ring, you could see that gorgeous mechanism in flight. Turn it all over, you get new caliber, an all-new caliber. 80-hour power reserve compared to the previous tourbillon's 40 to 42. It's still all 18-karat rose gold, so solid gold inside and out. You could see the remontoire and its black polished mechanism. It's actually a linear titanium spring, but there are several different components that comprise the remontoire. And as you could see, the watch couples the 1-second burst of quantized energy that flows from the barrel to the remontoire and via that buffer to the escapement to ensure that for the first roughly 40 hours of power reserve, you get constant amplitude. That's what the remontoire d'égalité does. It is a constant force device. Throw it on the wrist, and you can see this timepiece isn't quite as large as it looks. 42mm, it wears like a 42. The lugs are just over 51mm from lug to lug across the wrist. So while it's a broad watch, it's not an oversized timepiece. It's full-sized in the modern paradigm. And as you can see, it would easily slip underneath a cuff. Still a graceful watch, handsome and polychromatic with elements of red, blue, white, gold, and platinum. Absolutely stunning, comfortable, and arguably the greatest single advance in FP Journe tourbillon since his original 1999 tourbillon remontoire. Now that is an awesome piece. That was the sex bomb in 2019. That said, we can find watches that are more accessible. From the last 2 model years, Oris has begun to deeply elaborate its Divers 65, and in the Divers 65 steel and bronze, you get a combination that looks at first glance like traditional two-tone, but whereas a lot of guys are reticent about wearing two-tone in the modern era, the combination of the bronze and the steel is just about universal, with a deep, lustrous blue lacquer dial and a sapphire that has dramatic camber to emulate vintage plexiglass. It is, after all, the Diver's 65. This is a 40mm dive watch that wears like a vintage timepiece with modern fit finish quality and, of course, water resistance, which is always a sticking point on vintage timepieces. So you can see the watch wears easily on the wrist, whereas the Journe perhaps pushes the upper limit of a standard sized watch. This is a traditionally sized diver. Though 40mm, you can see that the close cropped lugs and the relatively narrow mid-case mark it as a product of mid-20th century design ethic, and it's a handsome, easy-to-wear piece with a simulated rivet bracelet and a feature that I consider to be remarkably useful is the vintage-inspired no-guard big crown. That makes it easy to manipulate the crown when your hands might be wet, sweaty, or gloved. An absolutely wonderful little 100-meter diver. That's a great way to get into horology if you don't have Journe Tourbillon Remontoir money. So the Tourbillon Souverain, impressive. But 2 years ago, I have to say, this watch gripped me with more emotional purchase than the Journe. I was absolutely lit up in 2018 by the Patek Philippe 5270p, the first ever 5270p, a timepiece that represents Perpetual Calendar and Chronograph in a 41mm platinum case. You can see that Vesselton diamond, top Vesselton diamond, brilliant cut between the lugs, so you know this is platinum, but it was the arrival of the rose gold colored salmon dial with the blackened indices, numerals, and hands that really zinged me. Now the case of this watch is impressive. As you can see, the lugs are dramatically stepped out. The case band has sharp defining lines and steps. And this is really a mark of just how far Patek Philippe case making has come since the early 80s, when it purchased Atelier Réuni and first started building its own cases. This is a quantum leap over their previous blended lug, almost cushion profile efforts. Now when you turn the watch over, you realize the best is saved for last. Well, if not last, certainly the reverse side. Caliber CH29 PS, manual wind, 65-hour power reserve. It does have hacking seconds. It also has a glorious lateral clutch and column wheel mechanism, which is, by the way, if you take a look at the lateral clutch, fully jeweled, no bushings, still with an overcoil hairspring, 6-position adjustment, and the watch guaranteed to run no worse than -3 + 2 seconds out of the Patek Philippe factory. As you can see, the timepiece is a simple, blinding blizzard of silver, gold, the violet pivot jewels, and as you can see, many different finishes, mirrored anglage on the edge of every chronograph lever and horn, as well as the edge of every bridge, satin finish on the steel tops of the chronograph components, the black polished and capped column wheel, black polished screws, engine turned base plate, and of course, Côte de Genève on the spare bridges. The timepiece, handsome and relatively slim. The timepiece easily wearable, I should mention, on a small wrist with a full platinum clasp. This is an easy watch with which to live. Like the Journe, it's not really traditionally sized, nor is it oversized. It's a modern, full-sized men's dress complication, and I've experienced every version of the 5270, and this is by far my favorite. This is what it should have been right at the beginning when it debuted back in 2011. That is the 5270p, the Perpetual Calendar Chronograph perfected. Now, speaking of chronographs with multiple functions, this one actually has multiple power reserves. This is a watch I owned. I didn't own this exact serial number, but I did own the watch. It was my Grail watch for 4 years of saving and my Grail watch for 4 years of owning. That 8-year experience, probably my most satisfying as a luxury watch owner. And this is the 2010 200-piece limited edition 42mm white gold Jaeger LeCoultre Duometre Chronograph, a timepiece that features 2 separate dials, one with hours, tens of minutes, a scrolling single-digit minutes disc. Then you have central seconds. You also have a 1/6 of a second Foudrillon, or lightning seconds hand, allowing this watch to resolve times as small as 1/6 of a second. Now when you reset it, it's quite a bit of theater. You'll also note that the watch has a running center seconds. So as a chronograph, it has both center seconds for a chronograph and for the time of day. Rose gold hands for the time, white gold hands, or I should say rose gold hands for the chronograph, white gold hands for the time. A power reserve indicator, a power reserve indicator. 2 reserves, 50 hours. The case, ornate, with black polished lugs welded into place, double finished mid-case and high satin, and then the monumental caliber 380 on the back. Manual wind, and as you can see, the two barrels are wound from the same crown. One ratchets while the other winds. They wind in different directions. Two 50-hour reserves, two drivetrains, two parallel trains intersecting at the escapement, which acts as a traffic cop, locking and unlocking each barrel in turn, so that there is one regulator, one heartbeat, two watches, hence Duometre. You'll also note that the bridges and plates are in German silver, or Maillot, since we are in the French-speaking regions of Switzerland, nickel, copper, and zinc, with copper giving it that explosive golden hue. And you can see there is a Côte de Soleil, or a sort of sunburst motif rather than linear Côte de Genève, radiating out from the 21/6 beat free-sprung balance across the bridges. You have both black polished and fired blue screws, a full white gold deployant clasp, no pin buckle on this, though later Duometre would include pin buckles. JLC was not trying to pinch pennies or trim the retail price of this watch back in 2010. This is the best version of the most important modern JLC, the realization of a dream dating back to the 1880s when JLC built a minute-repeating pocket watch using a dual drivetrain Victorin Piguet Ebauche, and that watch in the Heritage Gallery Factory Museum inspired the Duometre. Give me that over a 5170 all day long. Nothing wrong with the 5170, this is just better. Now, speaking of timepieces that represent limited editions, the JLC was 200, and this is a surprisingly short 350-piece limited run from IWC Schaffhausen, they of the 2,000 and 3,000-piece limited series. This is a watch from the 168th, or pardon me, this is the IWC anniversary 150 years. In 2018, celebrating 150 years since the founding of IWC Schaffhausen in Schaffhausen by American F.A. Jones. Unusual at the time to build a watch in the eastern German-speaking parts of Switzerland, but the French speakers would not buy into his idea of standardized precision. The Germans were eager to do so. Now, the watch you see here is the Portofino 8 days hand-wound Moonphase. It has a 12-layer hand-laid lacquer dial in white. It's not perfect white, it's slightly off-white to give it some warmth, so it doesn't look like bleached bone. Now you have the 12 layers, some of which are clear coats, some of which are lacquer, and they are executed with hand polishing at every stage, giving it a wonderfully lustrous, glossy finish, exactly like vintage IWC pocket watches. Now the hands and the indices are blue. There's an 8-day manual wind power reserve. You've got a quick set that allows you to rapidly adjust both the Moonphase and the date. Stop seconds are hacking. 45 millimeters in stainless steel, this 350-piece limited series is broad but flat on the wrist, wearing comfortably. And as you can see, because of the minimalist lugs, I'm going to compare it to something like a wire lug 45 millimeter Panerai rhodium. When you can wear those, but you can't wear any other 45 millimeter watch, you get exactly what I'm saying. This is a large watch that wears small on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, having no trouble accommodating it. It will fit underneath a cuff. Now 59800, that's the name of the movement on the back. And as you can see, it is a manufacturer caliber with the 150th anniversary rose gold medallion in its center. The 8-day power reserve, one more than the automatic that's based on the same basic architecture. You can see it's designed to fit the case because in its automatic form, it is the world's largest automatic movement. And as a manual wind watch, it fills this 45 millimeter carapace. A balance free sprung, adjusted in 5 positions with an overcoil hairspring, beaten away at 4 Hertz. You can see it has an expansive set of bridges with Côte de Genève and black polished screw heads. A timepiece that is broad, flat, elegant, and with 350 pieces, unusual. I can tell you, having seen everything, this is the first example I've seen of this watch outside of SIHH. And yes, the Portofino is my favorite IWC dress watch collection. I've never been a Portugueser guy. That said, for IWC traditionalists, and this is a very traditional IWC, the year 2000 42 millimeter IWC Portuguese 7 days is an all-time great. Now this inverse panda dial gives you the double silver counters, one for constant seconds, one for the 7-day power reserve. You get all of the reference 325 1939 styling cues, from Arabic numerals to sub-register seconds to leaf-style hands. And this powerful combination of black and silver is a breathtaking limited edition of 1,000 pieces from the year 2000, when the first generation of that caliber 5000 family debuted. This is also as a watch known as Reference 5000. Individual numbering, no 1 out of 1000 as IWC would later do. You can see it uses a plexiglass crystal, just like the original Portuguese, to evoke that original monumental breakthrough, the wristwatch that was as accurate as a pocket watch because it had a pocket watch caliber inside. The original caliber 5000 is an awe-inspiring thing. A lot has changed since then. It beats away, back in this millennial reference from 2000, at 18,000 vibrations per hour with a micrometric regulator for the balance. You can see there was an enormous rose gold Probus Scafusia motto-style medallion, and the movement, as large as it ever was, features the Peloton pawl-based winding system invented by IWC watchmaker Albert Peloton in the late 40s and industrialized in the early 50s. So not only was it the world's largest automatic movement, but it included a lot of significant watchmaking innovations past and present for IWC. Throw it on the wrist and 42 feels just about right for a Portuguese. I don't like them when they're larger. I don't feel that they're true to history when they're smaller. And this combination on the wrist is scintillating. You can see that the drape of the lugs draped around the edge of my wrist. The curvature helps it wear smaller than it is. And a lot of the height is the plexiglass, so this is not one that necessarily has trouble ducking under a cuff. It is a dress watch, albeit a large and sporty one, and it can be worn as a dress watch in any occasion. A watch that I absolutely adore. If you're going to own just one Portugueser that's not a vintage piece, this is the way to go. And at 20 years old, it is knocking on the door to true vintage status in its own right. That said, sometimes only the real deal will do. And with the serial number that dates it to late 1972, this Rolex Oyster Perpetual GMT Master 1675 is a lovely look back to the way we were, back when GMTs were commonly worn on straps, and this one is thusly equipped. As you can see, this is a Rolex factory strap with a Rolex factory pin buckle, so no expense has been spared to bring this watch up to snuff. It is a very different look. Of course, caliber 1575 beaten away inside at 19,800 vibrations per hour. It is a GMT Master, which means you use the calculator bezel to calculate the time in your local destination, whether it is an airport or a port. You take the 24-hour hand, which is set to Greenwich Mean Time, along with the watch itself, and as an aviator flying in, you will calculate the local time. This was created at the request of Pan Am back in the early 1950s, and the original 1954 GMT Master was in fact a special to Pan Am, the American Airlines, to allow their pilots to calculate destination time en route. Now the watch is about 39 millimeters in stainless steel, and you can see it wears quite differently than a modern GMT. First, because of its size and case profile, and this one still features evidence of the original hand-laid factory bevels, but it also wears differently because the strap changes its character. As no vintage watch should ever be used for swimming, I find the leather strap to be perfectly in character, charming, and evocative. Probably the best way to dress this watch and wear it. It gives it a versatility that it would not have on a bracelet. Now let's say you want a somewhat more contemporary Rolex, but you don't necessarily want to go with a 1990s or 2000s reference. We have this roughly 1986 Rolex Submariner. This is a timepiece that is the transitional reference 16800, and you can see that it is of the era of the gloss lacquer dial with the white gold appliques, beautifully and evenly faded. This is a true tritium fade. This ain't no Fotina. My favorite detail is the original tritium luminescent pearl in the diving bezel. Now the watch still has superb bezel action. It's still a chronometer. This timepiece actually can be used for swimming. It passed the water tests accordingly, and it's still new enough that it can live a life as a Submariner would have intended. The timepiece is also beautifully intact, as you can see evidence of the lugs featuring the original factory bevels in place, as well as full volume symmetry from end to end and corner to corner. You can also see this watch hasn't been extensively refinished, preserving the original metal as well as the character lines and details of the case. The dial is outstanding, the bezel is outstanding, the bracelet is outstanding. For a hollow end link, hollow center link Rolex bracelet, it has the charming rattle, but not the distortion that ultimately distends the watch and causes these bracelets to move into early retirement. There's no such thing here, as the bracelet feels crisp. The watch is intact. The look is imposing, classic, and immune to planned obsolescence. A 1953 Submariner customer would recognize this as a descendant of his watch. And for the Submariner centenary in 2053, the centennial of the original design, the owners of the latest reference will recognize this watch. This is a special, short-lived, transitional 16800 as worn on the wrist of Timothy Dalton during his brief term as Bond. His two films made this an official Bond Submariner. Now, quickly switching over to a somewhat newer model, we're looking at a Y-Series Explorer 2. We're climbing the ladder from the 1970s to the current day. Now, you can see this is an Explorer 2, a 16570. It's a Y-Series watch, and it features the perforated lug profiles, but you'll also note that it features the 78790A solid end-link bracelet. So this is also an example of a watch in transition. The Explorer 2 40mm pre-super case, you can see, as with the Sub, the lugs are beautifully intact, shapely and symmetrical from end to end and corner to corner. This is another watch that has the vintage feel and vintage look, but is new enough that you can still wear it as intended. It's still precise, it's still 100 meters water resistant, and this being a Y-Series watch, it's got a Luminova dial, so it's even going to glow correctly. A timepiece that wears beautifully and low cut. It has an entirely different character and profile on the wrist than one of the rotating bezel Rolex sports watches. So this is a timepiece that can get you energized to enter the world of vintage Rolex with baby steps without dealing with a watch that's so old that you need an expert and a leap of faith to buy it in confidence. This watch is as it left Geneva back in roughly 2003. Now we're going to take a quick step back to possibly the most interesting Rolex I have featured on this show. This is part of the year 2000. We're jumping back 3 years. This is the P-Series Rolex Oyster Perpetual Chronographe Daytona, and this is the watch in its 116519 white gold Daytona beach form. Now, while this watch is often described as blue mother of pearl, I can tell you, having gotten an inch away with a loop, this is a blue lacquer dial with much more intensity than the yellow and pink mother of pearl watches in this series. Heck, it's even more intense than the green chrysoprase. This is an awesome sky blue dial with bottomless glossy gleam in a white gold case of 40mm with a rare Rolex lizard strap in matching blue. This watch kicks ass. I love the look of it. I love the color. I love the irreverence of it as a Rolex, and the fact that Rolex built a watch like this. This is an incredibly rare timepiece. And if you're looking for modern day collectible Daytonas in an era when the vast majority of them are simply overvalued modern watches, look back 20 years and the Daytona Beach series, and then look to the green and blue dials for the scarcest of that series. Possibly the most versatile and most masculine of the four. This is a timepiece I could easily wear out every day in every attire. 3-day power reserve, in-house caliber, vertical clutch, column wheel, and if you throw it on a water-resistant strap, 100 meters. This is a monstrous Daytona. This is one of the most obviously collectible modern Rolex watches. Now, speaking of modern watches and modern classics, there is one Seamaster that is ranked above every other in the now 70-year plus history of the model, and that is the 1993 to present Diver 300 meters, sometimes known as the Bond. Refreshed for 2018, its 25th anniversary, the watch gained a new 42mm case while retaining its roughly 50mm lug-to-lug profile. It received a new ceramic gloss Omega Wave dial, a new caliber 8800 coaxial chronometer 55-hour power reserve movement, with the first display caseback on a series production automatic Diver 300 meters. Still 300 meters water resistant. You can see that the watch, which now includes a ceramic bezel insert featuring cold enamel indices and numerals, it has a lovely conical helium escape valve that can now be opened while you're underwater during a dive, previously not possible. The Bond style skeleton hands are back, and the fit, the feel, the finish, it's better than it's ever been. This is now a watch that puts the Rolex Submariner to shame. At less than half the price of a used sub, you can get these for well under $4,000, even in the mid 3,000s, and you're getting a ton of watch, as all of these were sold with 5-year warranties and released in 2018. All of them sold through ADs will still be under warranty. Again, 300 meters water resistant and still low enough at 13.7 that you can wear it under a cuff with a beautiful matching blue strap and pin buckle to match. A timepiece of extraordinary staying power. This is now the longest lived Seamaster design in the now, I guess, 72-year history of the model. Now, staying with Swatch Group, but perhaps a little bit more upscale, if you prefer your all-around sports machine to be a blue blood, they don't come much bluer, royal blue, than Breguet. And this is the 3820 titanium. 39 millimeters in titanium. The watch features a matching titanium bracelet and titanium clasp. Now, of course, the original Type 20 launched in 1954 in response to a French Ministry of Defense invitation for multiple brands to build what was then known as the Type 20 watch, named after the contract. There were several suppliers, of which Breguet proved to be the most enduring, and today is the most closely associated with the model. As with the original, this watch is a flyback chronograph that can be reset and restarted. But unlike the original, this watch pays homage to modern aviation technology with the titanium case and the carbon fiber dial. Outboard of each Arabic numeral, there is a small applique polished index, a high-grade carbon fiber dial with a big eye style minutes register designed to maximize the visibility of the single most important part of the dial after chronograph seconds. Whether timing maneuvers or your approach, this is a dial that is designed for utility, even as the watch itself is admittedly more of a luxury article. 100 meters water resistant, it features a bi-directional pilot's bezel, so let's say you want to time something that's 60 minutes long. You can't do that with the chronograph because it only has a 30-minute register, but you can align this bezel, and now you've got an impromptu 0 to 60-minute counter, so you can time two events concurrently. An old Lange 1350 base inside, doing business as Breguet caliber 582. Many connoisseurs of chronographs say that the 1350 Lange is the greatest cam chronograph ever made. Automatic winding, 100 meters water resistant, 48-hour power reserve, and a flyback. It wears feather light with a sub 46 millimeter lug-to-lug dimension, so it wears well even on the smallest of wrists, and in titanium, feather light, a truly special watch from a great model line and one of the all-time great names in the business. This could be your swimming watch, your formal attire watch, your casual watch, all of those, and it fits any wrist. If you're going to buy an Omega Moonwatch, a Patek Nautilus, an Audemars Piguet Royal Oak, you're going to get yourself a Moonwatch, your Referenzuhr, you're going to get yourself a Calatrava, you're going to buy a Portugieser from Schaffhausen. If you're a monuments man and you're collecting one of the iconic watch from each brand, then you're going to want to get a Type 20 from Breguet, because that is its icon. Now, an iconic brand, but perhaps one of its most underrated watches. This is the 2002 launch Cartier Roadster, a timepiece in stainless steel that represents perhaps the most masculine modern Cartier design. In an era when it seems most Cartier designs are a little bit confused, either too large, too ornate, too feminine, this simply cuts through them as an unrivaled homage to automobilia. Launched in 2002, this was unabashedly an appeal to male buyers. A mechanical watch in an era when Cartier mostly made quartz, a guy's watch in an era when Cartier mostly made ladies' watches, and all in steel with no gems in an era when Cartier made too many jewelry watches. This is a timepiece that appeals to the gearhead with a dial of radially arrayed Arabic numerals. You can see that it's a lovely piano-style track outboard and inboard sunburst metal designed to evoke the dashboards of 1950s Jaguar, Mercedes, and Porsche, and it does that beautifully with additional automotive cues such as the Dagmar-style bumper overrider that blends seamlessly into the crown structure, and the Frenched taillights doubling as the assembly screws at the end of the case lugs. Throw it on the wrist. This is a timepiece that wears easily, and it is a sports watch. Automatic winding, fully loomed with Luminova, and 100 meters water resistant. It's a timepiece that is wearable in any situation. At less than 10 millimeters thick, it fits underneath any cuff. It has a cambered case that wraps around the wrist, and across the wrist it's about 50 millimeters end link to end link when you include the bracelet. And the watch, of course, originally designed to use both straps and bracelets, with the first generation of the quick release lug system that would be seen later on other Cartier models, as well as IWC, a brilliant system that allows you to swap to a leather strap, a rubber strap, or the bracelet itself. And the bracelet with pivoted screws. The screws actually have pivoted heads that allow it to pivot in a silky form, so it's ultra supple on the wrist. This is a good-looking watch and probably one of the all-time great Cartier models. I hear more calls for the resurrection of that Cartier than I hear for any other Cartier model. Now let's talk a little bit about a sports watch that pegs the meter in terms of grandeur. Launched in 2018, 1 year after the record-breaking FP Journe only watch monopusher, this is the Chronographe Monopoussoir Rattrapant, a timepiece, 44 millimeters in platinum with a mauve dial. It's between blue and purple. This is the richest version of FP Journe's most aggressive sporting chronograph. Double-digit date, ceramic insert bezel. As you can see, only about 12 millimeters thick in profile. It's still a thin watch with an integrated profile that joins the bracelet and the lugs to the end links, creating a seamless fusion of case profile and bracelet taper. You'll also note the exquisite frosted finish, the media blasting on the platinum slash-cut links of the bracelet, rubber buffers to help preserve the finish. You can see the same is lavished on the flank of the case. The watch is impressively broad, flat, and on the wrist, though you can't see it, massive, with a rose gold movement, a platinum case, and a platinum bracelet and clasp to match. This is the best version of the Chronographe Monopoussoir, and it features the most attractive and enduring dial. Low-key in spite of its grandeur, this is a timepiece that appeals to the watch aficionado, not just the fashionista lately infatuated with the resurgent, I would even say ascendant above all, FP Journe brand. As Patek, Rolex, there's nothing hotter than Journe at the moment. But this isn't one that plays to the hype. This is a watch that delivers on an impressive mechanical engineering legacy of FP Journe. Now, let me see if I can get a little bit more light in here. This, maybe if I turn it this way, this is caliber 1518, 15 French lean, or approximately 34 millimeters. It's always difficult to show the movement on a bracelet watch. It features rose gold bridges and plates, an 80-hour power reserve manually wound, and it features a oscillating pinion system that starts the chronograph without any stutter or jump. So it has both the beauty of a lateral clutch and it has the smoothness of a vertical clutch. You can see it as a split-second mono pusher. The second trigger not actually used for resetting, it's used for freezing that second hand. And of course, once you stop it, being a mono pusher, you reset it. There's a quick set for the giant date, and again, it is a broad, flat, beautiful watch with a mauve dial that contrasts handsomely with the silver flash of the registers and the platinum itself. That is a very special watch from a very special brand. All of that said, however, sometimes you want the budget proposition, a chronograph with the same enduring aesthetic appeal, but a much more palatable price tag. This is the 2016 2,998 piece limited edition Omega CK2998. Now, of course, it uses the same case as the first Omega in space from 2012, but things have changed. You have a fully luminescent tachymeter bezel with a ceramic insert. There is a sapphire over the dial. You have a lovely blue panda dial, an unusual treatment that's simply glorious with its media blasted silvered center and the cantilevered applique indices of the hour track. You have the alpha style hands at center and on the registers to reference the original CK2998, the first Omega in space. And then the watch features a Moonwatch caliber inside, caliber 1861, cam, lateral clutch, 48-hour manual wind power reserve, and significantly, still the movement that flies with NASA astronauts. It's a different case size and a different case shape than a standard Moonwatch with squared off ends, minimal beveling, and as you can see, there are no shear guards or crown guards for the crown and chronograph pushers. So the watch wears more compact at 47 millimeters lug to lug than a standard Moonwatch. It's also a timepiece that dresses up nicely, especially on this contrasting stitch alligator leather strap. It has an upscale feel and ambiance about it that you don't necessarily get on every Moonwatch. A very special piece, and as I mentioned, considerably more affordable than the Journe. Okay, we're going to finish big here because I've got two pieces that are going to peg the meter, and we're going to start with an example from our friends in Saxony, glorious Glashütte. This is the Lange und Sohne Richard Lange Referenzuhr. As you can see, it features a sub-register with a flyback 0 reset seconds complication, much like that featured on the Hommage Walter Lange. This is a timepiece that was made in only 50 pieces back in 2010, named after Richard Lange, who was the scientist and watchmaker of the Lange family. This is a 40.5 millimeter platinum case with a grayscale dial that includes radially arrayed Arabic numerals, and Roman numerals, because it's a Richard Lange with Roman numerals. You can see that they're actually little red flourishes at the quarters, so it has surprising color. Now the dial is made of sterling silver, the case is made of platinum, and the movement, figuratively, is solid gold. Manual wind caliber L033. This is a gloriously embellished movement with perhaps the world's most elaborate zero reset second system. It works simultaneously like a lateral clutch, a recentering hammer, and a vertical clutch. You could see it recenters, but at the same time it recenters, there are little pincers on the flank that disengage the seconds drive before the recentering hammer actually zeroes out the seconds. So this is a difficult mechanism to classify or describe, other than to say it's simply brilliant and beautiful, as all of its components are black polished. You'll also note that there are pocket watch style wheels on the mechanism, designed to evoke those Lange pocket watches of the 19th century. Freehand engraving on the half bridge. You can also see that there is a freehand engraving on the cock for the escape wheel and a black polished cap. This is as good as it gets, with black polished screws, blued screws, glasuta stripes, German silver, and nickel copper zinc, freehand engraving, satin finish. You can see that there's mirrored beveling on the edges of the bridges and the levers, a special watch, and a massive watch, as I can really feel this platinum on the wrist. It's on an exuberant strap, as you can see, but frankly, it works, as the small red flourishes of the dial pop against the red of the strap. The strap is a high-grade Parisian-made Jean Rousseau, and as you'll note, it is alligator on both sides. Like an FP Journe factory strap, it's gator on both sides. More expensive, yes, but also longer lasting. A 50-piece limited edition from Lange. I have never seen another, and you might not either. If I've seen one, chances are you're going to see one or zero, because I see everything. Now, truly the capstone of a monumental episode. This is a timepiece made from 2006 to 2019, and made rarely. This is the king. The FP Journe Solarii Souverain, the Grand Solarii, 42 millimeters in steel, 10 patents, and as the watch was built on FP Journe's 90s research for Piaget, effectively the product of 15 years of engineering research. It is both a Grand Solarii, a Petite Solarii, and I should add, the third order function is a minute repeater. Black polished striker on the dial, 120-hour manual wind power reserve. You can see the movement of extraordinary size. Here we have no trouble registering the racks, the snails, the entirety of the mechanism that drives the Solarii as well as the minute repeater, and it is intricate. It's like staring down into a jungle of mechanical engineering. Now the case might be steel, but the movement is 18-karat rose gold. Let's have a listen, because this watch is both a minute repeater and a Grand et Petite Solarii. Quickly, Grand Solarii mode means that it will strike the hours and the quarters, and every hour, every quarter, it will let you know the number of hours and the number of quarters. Petite Solarii is just striking on the hours, and the minute repeater tells you the current time with hours, quarters, and minutes. So let's fire this bad boy up to 12:59. I'm going to do my best to locate at the single most vocal moment in a minute repeater's day, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the engineering. Boom! I am good. Now, this is a timepiece that will do more than just sound the current time. When it is in Solarii mode, Grand or Petite, it has the ability to sound the hours and the quarters the way a clock tower would, so you don't need to charge a strike barrel like you do with the minute repeater. This has its own power reserve. It will run for 48 hours in Grande Sonnerie mode, or for 5 days if you don't utilize the Sonnerie complication. This is your minute repeater trigger up at 2 o'clock, and down at 4 o'clock you have the trigger that changes the mode of the Grande Sonnerie. Grand, Petit, and Silent. This movement is absolutely monstrous. With over 400 components, it is perhaps the world's most advanced Grande Sonnerie and certainly one of the world's thinnest, and only about 12 millimeters thick. Throw it on the wrist, it actually wears thinner than the Tourbillon you just saw. And I should mention something about this watch. If you're an FP Journe aficionado, if you are a diehard of the brand, you're going to want something rare, and this watch is that. But the steel 42 millimeter is something else. There was officially no black label version of this watch. In general, they would feature a silvered dial, but this watch has a black dial, like the Black Label series. How did that happen? I have no idea, but this watch was only ever made to order, meaning something might have been arranged. This is a timepiece of extraordinary character, extraordinary lyrical, singing, sustaining musical voice, and of course, extraordinary achievement, as this represents FP Journe's ultimate watch prior to the celestial Souverain. This is a timepiece that has left me exhausted. Now, everything here is for sale. Names, references, and, where appropriate, prices in the description, but some of these watches are not on our website. That's a good example. Email me at tmosso@thewatchbox.com and start your journey. Perhaps your Journe journey. Thank you so much. Time out, Tim out. Good work by Garrett on camera and Sean on the switcher. And thanks for logging on.